Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Amazing Podcast. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Amazing. And if you like what you listen to on this episode, I want to encourage you to go check out all of our other episodes, subscribe so you don't miss another one. We talk about all things cloud native, Kubernetes, containers, DevOps, platform engineering. And our topic for today is going to be of interest to platform engineers. So if your work involves platform engineering or you work with platform engineers, you might want to listen into our conversation for today. I have with me Brian Singer, who's the co-founder and chief product officer at Nobl9. Brian, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me on, Twain. Very excited to be here today.
All right. Yeah, and the topic sounds really interesting. We're going to be talking about SLOs, service level objectives, and related to that, uh, just reliability, availability, and a lot of other, uh, you know, key, key things that are on top of mind for many platform engineers and even for SREs out there. So really excited to get us started on this topic. But before we get into all of that good stuff, tell us a bit about who you are, introduce yourself, and your journey up to co-founding Nobl9.
Sure. So Nobl9 was actually started based on some experiences that I had had at a previous startup. We were in the cloud billing space, and our operating a SaaS, I think as many of your clients probably know, you're constantly dealing with incidents and outages and customers being frustrated because things aren't working the way that they're supposed to. We were fortunate to be acquired by Google in 2016, and I went on sort of the path of being able to run what had been a pretty organically built piece of software up to Google production standards. And that was really my first experience with site reliability engineering, service level objectives. I think a lot of us had had cloud experience at that point, but it was still very much in the treating servers as pets, not cattle. Kubernetes in 2016 was just starting to get some momentum behind it. So we were concerned at the time with a lot of the classic reliability metrics. Hey, what's our CPU usage on our database? What's our uptime on our server? Can we ping the server? Well, it turns out that when it comes to reliability, availability is important, but it's only a piece of the puzzle. What I really wanted to understand as a startup founder and a product manager was, are my customers able to do the things that I expect them to be able to do in the platform? And is that a good experience for them, such that they want to continue coming back? And looking at sort of reliability just through that lens of uptime doesn't really answer that question for you. And that's, I think, what Google figured out pretty early on, and why they adopted this concept, not a new concept, of service level objectives. And so sort of when I was able to take service level objectives and marry that to solving the reliability challenges that I had running that piece of software, it sort of opened my eyes up that, hey, these are really powerful concepts. And that's when why we started Nobl9, was to basically make these concepts accessible to anybody who's working in operations or platforms or reliability engineering.
Oh, really interesting. Could you give us some examples that kind of make it more clear? What do you mean by, it's not just about availability, but what's your customer experience like? Could you give us some more tangible examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my situation, and I'll go back to running that billing platform, we were really concerned with two things: how quickly we could generate billing data for customers. We were ingesting data from the cloud providers and then trying to generate insights from that. So how quickly could we do that? And how accurate was that data, right? Because the customers don't just care that you can do it, they care that it's actually right. Those are actually two key things that go into creating good service level objectives. It turns out that we weren't great at either. It took us too long to generate the billing data on average, right? When we looked at that, and as a product manager, I could say, well, I think my customers reasonably expect this data within 15 to 20 minutes of it being available from the cloud provider. And secondly, in terms of it being accurate, we could tell when it was inaccurate. Software makes mistakes, but it was pretty easy to tell. The interesting thing is, before we started measuring those against sort of the objectives that we set, I think we intuitively knew that we weren't doing that, but it was really hard to prioritize working on the architecture and tech debt that would be required to actually fix those reliability problems. Once we had the data in the form of service level objectives and error budgets, and we could talk more about what that means and why it's helpful, we were able to actually make the case much more strongly to go prioritize those versus building new feature work. Because it turns out that reliability for most software products, whether you're running a web store or whether you're a B2B SaaS company or whether you're a healthcare company, reliability is typically the most important feature. Because if it's not reliable, I don't care what else it does, right? So but how often are we measuring reliability in terms that actually are meaningful to the customer?
Mhm. Pretty interesting. I was wondering if you could shed some light on this term itself, SLO, and
Yeah.
just culture around it and the mindset, because terms have different meanings when they're used by different people in different organizations. And I'm assuming even SLO itself has a kind of a history of its own, where I think it probably comes from an older term, SLA, Service Level Agreement. But talk to us a bit about how this term
Sure.
has evolved. What do organizations think of when they say SLOs? What does it mean in practice day to day?
Yeah. So service level objectives, when you boil it down, are really just metrics that specify measurable performance goals for a service. So essentially letting you measure whether a service is doing what it's supposed to do for users. That's pretty open-ended, right? Because it turns out software does all sorts of different things for users. Sometimes, if my service is a database and my users are people putting data into and out of the database, then my service level objective probably has to do with how quickly they can read from that database, how quickly they can write to the database, what are the latency characteristics of those transactions, how frequently is it correct? Maybe if it's an eventually consistent data store, how long does it take to become consistent, right? Those are things that we could measure and turn into service level objectives so that everybody has a clear understanding of what are the actual performance characteristics of this service and how well are we doing at actually achieving those and meeting them in real life traffic scenarios. Now, if your service is maybe, say, the login for a bank, right? Maybe you care about how frequently users are able to successfully log in when they have the right credentials. How long does it take to log in? Maybe if they're doing a password reset, how frequently is that password reset successful? So it's not always uh, just the latency or availability metrics, which everyone likes to focus on, but measuring actually the whole user journey in a piece of software. And the reason that they're really powerful for platform engineering teams specifically is that oftentimes the platform team gets blamed for unreliability, even though the platform is actually meeting the objectives when for latency and for how the platform is supposed to be operating. But what's sitting on top of the platform might not be architected properly, right? We all understand that in the world of Kubernetes, yeah, sometimes pods go down and stuff is restarted, and we have to take that into account in our architectures. platform engineering teams that have adopted SLOs have a really clear set of metrics that they can actually make available to the rest of the organization. So the organization understands, well, actually, my platform is meeting the goals that they've set. So there may actually be something going on in the actual software, in the implementation, in the architecture, in the delivery of that service, or if we're not able to meet our goals for reliability with the overall user journey, because the platform's not giving us the level of service we need, well, that's a different discussion, right? That's a discussion of, well, we need to actually maybe make more CPU available, right? We need to increase the size of the disk to get more I/O. But you have those clear, measurable objectives that everybody's talking about the same thing. And that's partly why SLOs are so powerful, is that they do get everybody on the same page, speaking the same language when it comes to reliability.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting in how they are defined and what they mean. And you also kind of got into a bit about, the different, the different priorities. And I want to even dig in a bit more to ask about that because, when meeting SLOs, it could probably kind of be like juggling different priorities and they're different, sometimes there's just a lot of data to look at,
Yeah.
decisions to be made. Uh, what are some of the challenges that SREs and platform engineers face when they try to meet these SLOs on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, everything is always a trade-off in engineering. I think we understand that. In terms of like the actual challenges that SREs face and how SLOs help with that. Well, when I talk to reliability teams, I think often they're influencers in the organization, right? Yes, they're working on reducing toil and eliminating toil. Maybe they're working on the platform, but they're not typically responsible for the actual feature development and the actual application code that's being written, even though often they're operationally supporting that. So SLOs ensure that there's a clear understanding of what the operational performance is, required to be. And if that's not being met, then the SREs have something to point to say, hey, we're not meeting the reliability standards. Now you have to go work on uh, uh, things that will help reliability, right? It's not just, hey, we'd like you to go work on refactoring this API because it's running too slowly, or we'd like you to go look at increasing the size of this database because it's not able to respond quickly enough, or we need to go look at some architectural changes here. Those are really painful things to do because, as we know, they're going to delay feature roadmaps. Nobody likes that. And it's hard to actually prove the value of that work. SLOs are a really clear way to do that. When we think about, and we didn't really talk about this yet, but what goes into an SLO, it's really just a ratio of the sort of good events that happen. A good event might be like, hey, a request happens under 100 milliseconds over the total number of events that happened. So, right, it's just a percentage. But and we take that ratio and we apply a time window to it. So we say, all right, I want, and I'll use a really straightforward example. I'm not saying this makes a great SLO, but a straightforward example is I want 99% of the transactions that come back from this API to be completed within 100 milliseconds. I want that to happen, I want that to happen 99% of the time over a 28-day period. Okay, well, if that API gets 100,000 requests in that 28-day period, that's basically saying, I want 99,000 of those requests to be 9,900 of those requests to be what did I say, 100,000, 99,000 of those requests to happen in under the threshold. That ratio, right? So that 1% that is basically, I'm saying it's okay if that takes longer than 100 milliseconds. That's my error budget, right? That's the tolerable amount of unreliability in the service, which is incredibly important because as we try to make things more and more reliable, it gets more and more expensive in terms of both the actual cost, right? If we need to be 4 nines available, I think everybody knows that means that we have to typically run multi-region, for example, so that if one region goes down, we're able to serve requests from another region. Well, that's expensive, right? You're doubling up the infrastructure. I can run at 4 nines, 5 nines if you want to spend the money. The reality is for most services, it's not worth it to be that available, right? So we want to actually set something that makes sense for the user. You think about it in terms of how you use software, right? If you go to use Gmail, for example, if 1 out of every 100 times it takes 3 seconds for the homepage to load versus 1 second, you're not going to notice that. You're going to chalk it up to the network being slow or whatever. But if that happened half the time, you'd be like, well, this is a really crappy service, right? So getting the right SLO is about dialing in that amount of unreliability or that error budget. And then once we have the error budget dialed in, we can do really interesting things like alert if we're actually consuming that error budget too quickly. So if we're getting a ton of requests that are taking too long, and we know what our error budget is, and all of a sudden we've blown through it in a day instead of a month, well, that's a really obvious sign that we should alert. And so the SLOs give you the ability to apply this concept called error budget or burn rate based alerting, which is another concept that came out of Google, the SRE book. And it's another very powerful concept because it ties your incident response to the actual customer impact or the actual customer pain that's happening, not just, hey, I violated some threshold. So that's why we think it's a very powerful concept.
Really interesting example there. And I think we're kind of inching towards, talking about even, so like the crux of the issue and even the solution. Your example, which said, we want this percentage of this many requests over this many days to be under this threshold. That's quite a complex, metric to analyze, to firstly accurately measure
Yeah.
and track. And then you have this whole challenge of once you've tracked it, uh, let's say it doesn't meet the threshold and it's not meeting the SLO, then okay, you need to find the root cause, you need to find the bottleneck. And then once you found that, figure out, okay, which team is responsible for this. So it sounds like there's a whole bunch of roadblocks along the way. Uh, would you say that's accurate? Could you talk a bit more to this? What lies beneath the SLO?
Sure. Well, I think there's two parts to that, right? There is identifying what the right SLO is. And to do that, you need to understand a little bit about your service and what you're trying to accomplish with it. And that's a challenge, right? Just up front, but it's very valuable work because now you're looking at what are the risks to my service? What happens if it does, what happens if it does go down for a day, right? Will anyone notice? What happens if it goes down for an hour? What is my acceptable level of risk? That's a very valuable conversation to have. And SLOs are a great framework to be able to have that. And then you move into all right, I know what I'm trying to measure. And actually, we have so much data today that you probably have the data already that you need in order to feed the SLO. We call it the service level indicator, but really it's just whatever telemetry or time series or logs has the relevant information for you. And then you come to this point where, okay, now I want to start calculating the SLO and I want to start reporting on it and take action on it. And that's where a solution like Nobl9 comes in, because our reason for existence is to actually make that process as pain-free and smooth and seamless as possible and easy as possible, because we want our customers to be focusing on, do I have the right SLO? And then taking the action based on that, where is the actual problem? What dependency is failing? Which team needs to go work on reliability today? So, that's why we built Nobl9. And I think, if you look at sort of that process of defining the SLO, monitoring the SLO, alerting on it, reporting on it, and then you look at that as a life cycle, we do a really good job of sort of fitting into that life cycle and then just making, for us, it's just about making life easy, like make it easy to adopt and understand, so that sort of the ROI from this can be unlocked for sort of any customer.
Right, really interesting. On that, I'd like to segue to talking about just the solution and even the product you guys are building out there. Tell us a bit about that. What's the right approach to SLOs, and even what's Nobl9's approach to SLOs? What does it do? How does it work? And then we could soon get into a walkthrough or a demo that you have for us.
Sure. So, like I said, we're really focused on making it easy to define and then manage and use the data that comes from the SLO. So Nobl9's approach is actually to sit on top of the existing telemetry. So like I said, there's so much data, too much data, I would say in a lot of cases, logs, metrics, traces, like what is the interesting stuff to look at? And I can build 100 dashboards of latency and thresholds, but they're not actually really going to tell me how reliable the service is operating. And that, similarly, if I try to focus on MTTR as a metric that I'm optimizing, or mean time to recovery, well, that really just tells me how good I am at responding to incidents. But I think most of us understand that it's actually probably better to not have the incidents to begin with. And if as platform teams or SREs, we're just running around trying to get better at responding to incidents, we're not actually focused on the things that help us achieve our ultimate business goals, which is deliver whatever sort of software we're delivering, whatever sort of business processes we're supporting, doing that efficiently, cost effectively, and quickly, and delivering innovation. So that's sort of where a solution like Nobl9 comes in. And I'll I can share my screen and give you like kind of a quick, couple pieces that I think will help make SLOs maybe a little bit more of an approachable concept to the viewers. And hopefully you can see my screen there. Let me just resize it a little bit. Is that good coming through?
Yeah, I can see it.
Great. So what you're seeing here is a bunch of services that we have in this demo environment. And I would say if your listeners would like to play with something like this, we have a demo environment like this that they can use, available on our website at nobl9.com.
Right.
And I can see basically the services where I haven't run out of error budget. These are the ones with the green circles, and the services where I have actually run out of error budget, and these are the ones in the red circles. So if I come over here, I can see that this search API latency, I've actually exhausted 5 times the amount of error budget that I made available. So that's probably like a little bit of an issue here. And I can see here basically what's going on with this service. If I drill in here, the source data for this is coming from Datadog. The time window we're looking at is 28 days, and that's a rolling time window, so it's constantly being updated with new data. And we're basically saying 95% of the time we want to be under 6 seconds for the search. I think that's 6 milliseconds for the search API latency metric. Okay. And we can see here that we were doing pretty well, and right about here something happened, and we've actually been alerting like kind of frequently. These are system-based alerts that have been generated. And so you can see here basically this is the actual service level indicator that's coming in. And I'll zoom into this time period right here so you can see it. And so we're actually like kind of frequently above the threshold that was set here, whereas before we were a little bit below it. And this is the speed at which we're burning through error budget, right? So this is why that alert is firing so frequently. So this tells me that like, yeah, something really significant is going on here. In this time period, I was I still had error budget available, but if I zoom out here again, right, I can see that I've consumed all of my error budget. And if I look, I'm only around 70% reliable right now in this time period. So the simple concept, but now I can start to look, and I can go here to a catalog, or sorry, sort of a grid view, and I can start to look across all my services and understand whether they are operating reliably just by looking at one chart, right? And that's really the power of SLOs. And we can alert on these things. We have incredible reporting. But if your users want to get more familiar with it, I'd encourage them go sign up for the demo environment, play around with it a little bit, and I think at the very least they'll be able to get some better understanding of what SLOs are.
Mhm. Is this the same demo environment that you're looking at?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we make this available to anyone that wants to log in and sort of play
All
around with
right.
it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and uh, what about like alerts or root cause analysis? Any other parts of the product that you'd like to demo as well?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll let me just share again real quickly. I probably jumped out of there too quickly. So the alerting is actually really cool. If I go here, here's an SLO that's firing right now, dashboard latency. So that's the latency of these dashboards, for example. And if I go in here, I can see we have this alert policy that's attached to the SLO. And the alert policies in Nobl9 are pretty cool. So this is basically saying that if the average burn rate is greater than 20x, over a 5-minute alerting window, then we want to fire that alert. The burn rate, if you remember, that is how quickly we are consuming the error budget. A 1x burn would basically mean that we would exhaust the error budget by the end of the period, right? So a 20x burn is pretty high from a burn rate standpoint. That indicates that we're actually seeing a lot of errors based on how we've defined the SLO, right? And this policy could be attached to really any SLO. We've attached it to this dashboard latency here. And if I come in here, I can see basically, here's where the service level indicator spiked up a little bit. And we can see the error budget burn rate basically spiking up here. And that's when the alert fired.
What about defining the alerts itself? I read something about SLO as code on your website. Could you kind of show us what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So SLOs is code. So everything you see that's configured in here is actually defined in sort of Kubernetes-style YAML. So if you're familiar with Kubernetes YAML, I can look at the configuration actually for this particular SLO and see that basically, it has an objective that's called very good with a value. So that's basically saying the value, we want to be less than 1.75 99% of the time, and here's the query that we're giving it. So you don't have to define all this yourself. We actually help you generate this, but the cool thing is that then you can have SLOs that are sort of checked in, reviewed. If you're going to update the SLO, right, it becomes part of your CI/CD workflow for how you manage services. So very developer friendly. And developers obviously are the ones who are defining the SLOs and then managing them. So it just makes it easier to consume the platform and get SLOs adopted by more and more teams.
Okay. Oh, that's really interesting. I saw that you recently open sourced a new tool. Could you tell us about it and what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually open sourced a tool called Govi.
Mhm.
So Nobl9 is our backend is written in Go, and you may have noticed that we have a bunch of YAML there. Well, YAML being what it is, sometimes things are defined incorrectly, or that not quite the right spec, that kind of thing. It's great to be able to validate that at the time the customer is trying to pass it to the API and actually give them like good error messages. And that's what Govi helps with. It's a validation library, so it can basically within Go, right, we're validating that the YAML has the things that we want it to have. But really, I think the more valuable piece is being able to create good error messages instead of just an error message that's like YAML rejected. Well, why was it rejected, right? Because we obviously these aren't things that are compiled. So if you do have any sort of project where you are validating incoming YAML or JSON, Govi can be a great library for you.
All right, neat. As we draw to the end of our conversation, Brian, I was just wanting to ask about your thoughts about the road ahead, the next year or so, for this space of just looking at
Yeah.
reliability, or just even Nobl9, and what you guys are most excited about and what you're working on for your next version, maybe. Give us a hint about what's ahead.
Yeah, so we've seen, I think, a really tremendous amount of uptake of SLOs. I would say it's especially prevalent now in large organizations. Anyone that has any sort of tie between, how software is running and how their business is doing has become interested in SLOs. In terms of where we're going with the platform, without giving too much away, there's a few areas that we're really excited about for the next year. We're looking more at how do we generate more insights from the SLO data that we have, which are really strong signals into how platform is operating. And so, we can tell you sort of where the dependencies are that you may not understand based on who's burning error budget, for example. So that's something that you should expect to see from us. And then the other area is really the workflow of service level objectives. So, being able to understand, like, how frequently do we want to review this, and is somebody looking at it, and is this a production SLO versus something that we're using to test? And so just making that a little bit more ergonomic is important too, and extending the capabilities, sort of what kinds of SLOs we can calculate. We have a really robust platform, I'd say definitely at the forefront of the industry for SLOs, but our customers are constantly pushing us to expand to more use cases. And so that's a sort of key piece of R&D for us too.
Mhm, mhm. Wow, pretty interesting. So better root cause analysis, better uh, collaboration, I guess, and just operation, being able to manage your operations better. Sounds exciting. What's
Yeah.
one example of this, the last thing that you mentioned, which is, new use cases that your customers are pushing you to build? Could you give us one example at all, if possible?
Yeah, sure. So, something that actually is coming pretty soon is today in Nobl9, you can exclude certain time periods from when error budget is actually being calculated. So let's say that you have a business that only operates between 9 and 5 p.m. You don't care what happens outside of those hours. Today in Nobl9, you could say, like, okay, if this happens, like, if something happens, like, don't burn error budget, right? We're actually going to add the ability to exclude previous time periods as well. So, hey, we had this maintenance period, but we don't want to use it to calculate our SLA. So can we exclude that past period from error budget calculation? So that's something that we're going to be adding. And there are more, but I don't want to give too much away.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that was wonderful listening to you, Brian, talk to us all about SLOs. Thanks for sharing all of that. And we hope you'll come back and talk to us once you release those new features. Tell us all about it and demo it for us.
Yeah, I would
And
love to. And if your listeners have questions, we're always happy to just have a discussion about SLOs, sort of product free. And if they're interested in understanding how to deploy them in their environment, that's something we can help with as well.
all right, awesome. Yeah. Uh, the spelling, by the way, oh, it's right there on the screen, but it's Nobl and the number 9, Nobl9.
Yeah.
So definitely look for that on Google. Brian, before you go, though, just one question to get to know you a bit. What would you say would be your alternate career path if not for your job in tech?
It's a great question. I would probably say some sort of a uh, golf professional.
Oh,
Not
okay.
professional golfer, but golf professional, like maybe a superintendent or something like that. Because I love being
Okay.
outside, love the outdoors, but I think
Okay.
the call of software development is too strong for me.
Do you have a favorite course?
Oof, that's a good question. I love if South Carolina, Kiowa, the ocean course there, on the ocean, on the water, beautiful setting, great course.
All right. Wow. Yeah, I hope to play that someday. Golf. I haven't yet tried my hand at it.
You'll have to take it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, all right, that was a lot of fun, and we hope you listeners and viewers enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. We hope it's got you thinking deeper about SLOs. So definitely go and check out the demo, as Brian was saying, and see all that Nobl9 is up to on their website and their blog. And we hope you'll join us for the next episode. That's it for now. Bye bye.
Thanks, Dwayne.